Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I want to talk about infinity mirrors. This is something I think any builder has probably been asked to do a half dozen times, if not more. And within the car community, I think a lot of people have started to see these more and more. Obviously with the Skeptic innovations on the GTRs, the Skylines, they were doing some pretty cool stuff with these years and years ago, still are today. But you know, one of the biggest downsides, they look amazing indoors, but most of the time you take these outside, the sun's shining, you can barely even see the lights. And one of the main reasons of that is the fact that the LEDs are directional. LEDs will shine in a certain direction, and if you're looking directly at the LEDs, you're going to get a lot more light output than if you are at an angle. The second issue is that mirrors are kind of like tinting. You are blocking some of the light output by the use of a mirror. But the only way that you get an infinity mirror look is with that reflection back and forth, where it's bouncing back and forth between the top mirror, which is a two-way mirror, and the back mirror, which is a standard mirror. So that has been a big hurdle for a lot of people when it comes to putting these on cars. I always make sure to warn anybody that asks me to build a set, your output may not be great. They are probably not good on the streets, probably wouldn't try them. Obviously, for those of you watching this that aren't really sure, I've got it on a show mode right now. This would not be how you would be driving down the street. If you're driving down the street, you'd probably be in a red mode for your running lights, flash brighter red for your brakes, your amber turns, white reverse, all those standard functions generally are within this as well, but being RGB, it can do many different colors. This is just kind of the way that you can show that, how it has a lot of colors. So many different options for that. If you're not really familiar with it, it can kind of do as little or as much as you want it to do. But the key part is that infinity looking LED barrel of sorts where it just keeps going back. Another aspect to it is the depth. Now obviously this is not terrible, it looks pretty good. You have quite a few layers of LEDs, even though there is only one row of LEDs inside of this infinity mirror, it does go back many different layers. As you can see, size wise, and I did just make this one for this video, so it is not necessarily specific to any car or anything like that, but it does have the back mirror. There is a strip. In this particular case, I'm using our UCS, or our SK6813, which is an RGB 12-volt LED. The output is quite good on these strips. For anyone that's tried them or checked them out, I think they're a smidge brighter than the SK6812s or the WS2812s, anything like that. I think they're just a touch above what you would get from those, but still not something that I would want to be driving down the street with this being my only taillight function. So with that, as with anything else, Next Level Neo is always looking at trying to take it to the next level, trying to make things more practical, more bright, something that people can use. With that, we've entered in the UCS2903. Now this is using a 25 milliamp per color LED, versus with these, they are a 13 milliamp per color LED. So basically more power, more bright. Usually kind of how it works. That's not always the case, but I do think that we have gotten to the point where these are much more street practical. Once again, I'm not saying that these are DOT approved. I'm not saying that you should go driving down the road with these all RGB, things like that. They are off-road use only, so please keep that in mind. But for those willing to dare to run RGB LEDs on their daily drivers or on their cars or on the streets, we definitely do what we can to make it so that you are able to do that. But once again, understanding you are doing that at your own risk. These are in no way, shape, or form considered DOT legal. As with anything that we sell, the DOT approval process is extremely expensive, and you must consider there are basic colors that are required on the road. So this is not for road use, but we think we've taken it up a notch as far as outdoor car shows, things like that. Definitely taken it brighter. You can see the depth of the LEDs themselves, how far back that tunnel effect actually goes. And I am by no means a extreme professional when it comes to infinity mirrors. Maybe one day I'll do a video more detailed about infinity mirror creation, but definitely I have seen far better work from other builders. So just kind of threw together these so you could see a comparison. I did want to show it side by side as well. Now these new strips, which I actually do have, here's a scrap piece. This is not a full length strip, but you can see it is a 20 millimeter wide PCB. It is flexible though. That's the nice part. We do have these in rigid, but the problem with rigid is obviously you cannot bend it to create that round cylinder that you need for the infinity mirrors. Problem with the flexible PCBs is all of these extra circuit pieces on our rigid boards, we put them on the back of the PCB. You cannot put this stuff on the back of a flexible PCB like this. You cannot mount anything like that. So we had to get a little bit creative, and the basic idea was that we would have a empty spot in between the components and the LEDs, and that way you can wrap your mirror with the components on the back side, so you still get that tight spacing with the LEDs, but you also get all of the components that are required to make these LEDs do what they do. Unfortunately, there are no standalone LEDs like you would have with the SK6813s that are going to be this bright. You have to have that offset circuitry to make it all work. But these are cuttable. As you can see, every 3 LEDs, they can be cut. They are 12 volt. The output is quite good on them. They are quite bright. And the solder pads are located to where another issue that is commonly seen with traditional strips is that you've got to try to hide the wiring. And sometimes that can get really difficult because it's right along the strip. You're trying to make this fit in a round hole, and that means you have to try to tuck the wiring, hide the wiring, do something to that. It's not the end of the world. It's not horrible to do, but this is just something that we thought about adding to ours to make it so that's not even an issue anymore. So ours are actually on the back side, which means that your wiring will actually be behind the mirror, and all the LEDs will be in front of the mirror. And then you would have the other mirror, the two-way mirror, in front of that. But with that, that does bring a thicker offset. So that is something to consider between the two. But obviously, brightness is a pretty big factor. So if you are trying to get something super bright, it's probably worth the hassle of whatever you may end up having to do to make this fit versus the thinner one, just being that it is far more bright. And you can see I still have that mirror just as close, so the depth, the spacing of the LEDs is about the same. These are both 144 LEDs per meter, but please keep in mind that on the UCS2903, it is 3 LEDs per address. So if you're familiar with color flow, addressable LEDs, things like that, you'll understand what that means. But basically, it means that for each channel, the controller can control 3 LEDs at a time. Whereas with the SK6813, it can control each LED individually. One interesting part, so this is a much lower draw than this one. This one at SK6813, 12 volt, and this is the UCS2903 at 12 volt. Pretty much the same amount of LEDs in there because the spacing is the same. These are both exactly the same acrylic mirrors cut from the same sheet. So everything is the same except for the LEDs and obviously the depth involved. This is hotter than this one. So one would think with the extra power, this one would get hotter. They are both warm. They're both warm, but I can easily hold them here. They've been running for a while. It's not burning my fingers. It is warm. But that does not seem to be an issue with either. They both have been very resilient. But the UCS definitely wins out overall just because of the brightness factor, as well as the extra design with the LEDs. And once again, there are many different LED strips out there that people can use for infinity mirrors. You can use a WS2812, which is pretty common. You'll see those on Amazon and things like that with the BTF. Those are less output than even this. Not by much, but by a little bit, they are less output than even this. Definitely would not compare to the UCS. The same thing with the SK6812s. Slightly less than this. Almost not even noticeable, but it is slightly less power output than the SK6813s, but definitely will not compare to the UCS2903. Now, some people have asked me, why did we not go with the UCS2904 versus the 2903? And the reason for that is the brightness output. The RGB options on the market are much wider, broader. We can do a lot more with them. The chipsets for the 2903 versus the 2904. The 2903 can actually go clear past 40 milliamps per color. I want to say it goes clear up to 60, but it can go pretty high. We found a very nice medium here where we can safely put it on a flexible PCB. It does not get extremely hot. It is still quite bright. This is like our happy spot. This is where we like to be. We can produce things that are brighter utilizing that extra milliamps that is available with the UCS2903, but obviously heat does become a factor at a certain point, so that is why we landed there. Alternatively, on the UCS2904, one of the issues is that you are limited to 17 milliamps per LED. Now, if you compare that to the SK6813s, which are limited to 13 milliamp per LED, or the WS2812, or the SK6812 RGBW variants, the SK being the RGBW, both of those are 12 milliamp per color. So your power output being lower generally means your LED output will be lower. And that's not 100%, that's not always the case, but generally that is the case of what you're going to see. And in the case of these running 25 milliamps here, you are more than double of what you would be with an SK or a WS chipset. And we think it does show quite well on this. In addition, you do not need an inverter for the 12-volt options, which both of these are 12-volt options. So there's no need for a 5-volt inverter to make everything work right. That's not a deal breaker for most people, but that is a plus, I would say, in that there is no need for regulation. One thing I would most definitely consider is power draw. So with brighter LEDs, generally more power, you also have to deal with a higher power draw. So that may mean on a show car you're going to need to upgrade your battery to something that can run for a longer period of time. And this may not be an issue at all if you have a car that primarily doesn't do car shows. Maybe you only showing the lights off when the car is running. That may not be as big of an issue, but you are going to want to keep in mind your wire gauge. I would recommend at least 18 gauge. If you're running clear from the front of the car to the back of the car for your power, you're probably going to want a thicker 12 gauge, probably from the front to the rear. If your battery happens to be in the back, or you have some other way to tap into power, maybe an amplifier or something like that, where you've already got 4 gauge, 8 gauge, 0 gauge, something like that ran to the back, that would be perfectly fine, and you could run 18 gauge from these LEDs to that. But you definitely want to keep in mind power draw when using something brighter, a little more power hungry like these, versus what you might have been getting away with the SK6813s. In addition to that, you're also going to want to keep in mind of the power draw when LEDs are off. Now, UCS is notorious for drawing a lot of power when the car is off This is one of the reasons why we developed the power savers, battery savers. If you look on the website, same thing. The benefit to that controller add-on is that it will actually disconnect the power from the LEDs when not needed, when you don't need to use it. Now, we do have another video that goes much more in detail about wiring that up, its functions, and how it works. But by and large, it makes it an automated relay system that will turn off the power to the LEDs when it's not in use, and it will easily turn them right back on when you want to show off. So those are several things that you're going to want to keep in mind when it comes to power, wire gauge, some form of a disconnect when not needed, and battery size if you're thinking about running these long-term sitting at a car show. I am a huge fan of lithium. I'm slowly working on switching all my cars over to lithium. It is a little bit of a newer technology under the hood of a car, but it has come a long way. It's much like LEDs versus HIDs when it comes to projectors. We've come so far from what it was years and years ago. My show cars, I switched from AGMs to LED batteries, and I've not looked back at the upgrade from the AGM to the LED. The length of how long the battery runs, the ability for it to maintain 12 volts. Keep in mind, AGMs, lead acid batteries, things like that, even if they have a capacity rating, you're never going to get that capacity, that full amp hour rating out of that battery, because once it gets down to 50, 30%, whatever, it gets down in that percentage of battery life left, the voltage continues to drop, and eventually you're going to drop to the point where you don't even have enough to get the LEDs to fire up. With lithium, you go down, clear down to 1% battery life, and you're still at 12 volts. It's very nice. It is also, you've ever heard the deep cycle batteries like the Optima yellow tops and things like that. Theoretically, they are designed to be deep discharged many times and recharged back up many times. That is in theory. Obviously, there's still a limit to the amount of times that you can do that, and you will start to see a degradation of the battery the more times that you deep discharge that battery. Lithium batteries are much more resilient when it comes to that. Think about your cell phone and the idea that you use your cell phone, you drain it down almost every day to probably near 0% for some of us, and then you fully recharge that battery back up. You can do that thousands of times and your battery will still hold a pretty good charge. That's the same idea. If you're running a show car, you are deep discharging your battery many times. And lead acid and AGM batteries just don't cut it. Lithium is where it's at. If you are a show car dedicated, you're parking inside, outside, whatever, with the car off, running your lighting system, you're going to want to go lithium. So, a little lithium plug there, definitely something worth checking out. But when it comes to the infinity mirrors themselves, it's definitely something you're going to want to check out. If you are looking at doing a set of infinity mirrors yourself, they are pricey, but you got to consider they're just better LEDs, they're brighter LEDs, they cost a lot more than what the SK6813s would. If I could sell these for 20 bucks a meter, I would sell them for 20 bucks a meter all day long. It's just like I'm losing money. So they are priced higher, but we believe that if you do get some, you check them out, you will see the reason for the higher price point pretty easily. But there they are. And both strips are available on the website. Now, I do not do mirrors. I don't laser cut the mirrors. I don't do any of that stuff. It's like fingerprints and all that. Gosh, man. It's a pain in the butt. I'm going to tell you right now. Gloves are a great idea. These are demo units, so I'm not as worried about it. They're not going to be going on a car or anything. But if you do build, make sure you have some gloves on hand for handling them. Currently, I would reach out to Illumisthetic if you are looking at getting mirrors cut. As of now, they still do that. So I would reach out to them and see if they are still cutting mirrors, and you can get some from them. I will also include a link in the description to some infinity mirrors that I've used before, actually the ones I used in this case right here. And you can buy the material, which comes in square form, different lengths, and then you can cut those down, ideally with a laser cutter, but you know, if you absolutely have to, you could probably get away with trying to do it by hand. It's going to be tough though, so I warn you, it's not real easy unless you got a laser cutter. But I will link that for anyone that is interested, at least in what I have used. And there are many different brands, and there's many different things, and I by no means know the absolute best way to do it. As far as the branding goes and things like that, the percentage of light that it allows to pass through is a big factor on how bright the output can be. So definitely something to keep in mind. But I will have that link, as I said, so that you can at least use what I'm using, which has pretty good effects, pretty good outcome on what it does. But a little bit of a lengthy video, but I did want to cover the infinity mirrors a little bit more in depth than I might do on some of my other videos, just to some of the factors that you're going to have to consider if you are doing them. But thank you for watching. You can find these LEDs on our website at nextlevelneo.com. I will have a link in the description for these LED strips. And I'll throw the SK6813s on there as well, just so you can kind of compare price-wise, or you know, see what you think. And I will have those in the description. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, comment, let me know what you guys think, and look forward to the next video.